to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to continue our ongoing spotlight on student organizations here in the Executive MBA program with an interview with JB Norcott and Matthew Boyd. JB and Matthew are co-presidents, newly elected, for the Black Executive MBA student organization, and recently connected with them to talk more about their backgrounds, how they decided to pursue an MBA, what led them to Darden, and of course, what they have planned for the Black Executive MBA student organization, or BEMBA, as it is colloquially known, in the coming year. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here is my interview with JB Norcott and Matthew Boyd. JB, Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brett.
Hey,
Thank
Brett.
you for having us.
Great to have you here. Absolutely. So this is an annual tradition. We've had the Black Executive MBA leadership come on. Every time there's new leaders, we have them on the podcast. It's great to have you both here. And we're recording a whole bunch of student organization focused podcasts over the next couple of weeks. Of course, we roll them out, but it's so much fun to catch up with your classmates while you're at this point in the program. So we just had an incredible mid-program celebration on Saturday night. It's so much fun to celebrate, the midpoint, so to speak. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, and a great rooftop deck and everything like that. Super happy about that, and got the good weather and everything. It's nice.
Yeah.
80 degrees on a roof in Roslyn, overlooking all of DC, and you can't sunset.
Right?
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Can't beat it. Can't beat it.
Cannot beat it. Cannot beat it. And we have started taking that moment in the program to acknowledge, you get to Q5, 5.2, I guess is what y'all were doing this past weekend. For our listeners who are wondering, you move through the program in 2-month quarters. And in the program structure, there's one weekend residency and then a second weekend residency in that quarter. And so the first weekend residency is known as point 1, and then the second weekend residency in that quarter is known as point 2. So JB and Matthew are currently in quarter 5, and they just had quarter 5.2 weekend residency. So, okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's check in with y'all. And JB, I'll come to you first. How's everything going?
It's going well, Brett. Really going well. I mean, like you said, just got through with another intense OGR, some great classes and everything. Really looking to move into finals and get through with that. So that's on the horizon here. But otherwise, everything's going good.
Yeah, y'all are taking, let me see if I can get these classes right. Decision analysis, operations, and you have leading organizations also. And then you have a new course, what's called Professional Advancement Course 2 that's running right now, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so a busy quarter to be sure. Matthew, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to throw out there that me and Matthew are also taking the other new course offered, the Leadership Learning Lab offered by Gabe. So that's another one, but that's a absolutely fantastic, phenomenal class. Really been happy to be in that. So that's heavy course load this quarter. I'll say that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we'll talk about all of this. Don't worry. We'll come back to that course for sure. Because one of the great things about the podcast is to be able to spotlight courses that people are doing. Our listeners might know a bit about the core curriculum, but also curious about the electives. So we'll come back to it. Don't worry. Matthew, how are you doing?
Actually, Brett, doing pretty well. I mean, it's been a busy quarter, honestly, a busy year. I believe we're already in June of 2022, so it's gone by very quickly. But overall, the program's been fantastic so far. And, actually winding up on another round of finals soon. So trying to prep and prepare for finals that are going to be coming up at the end of this week. Kind of the final window opens, and we have a whole week been able to get through some of those finals that we have and final deliverables. So busy, but overall doing really well.
That's great. You're right. Things do not slow down for people while they're in the program. But, one of the things that's also true is people move through this program pretty quickly. One of my favorite questions to ask when people kind of get to this point, Q5, Q6, midpoint, so to speak, Do you feel like you're about halfway through the program, Matthew? Is that how it feels at this point to you?
I mean, I feel like I'm just beginning, and I feel like I'm also in the right place. That's what I can say for sure. Just because I think the program goes by pretty quickly overall, just because you're working and juggling multiple different things. I know JB and I both have, wives and families that you're juggling. And then, of course, you have your full-time career. And then you also have the Executive MBA program. So with all those things kind of juggling one another and trying to prioritize what needs to stay priority and deprioritize other things, it's definitely been challenging, but at the same time rewarding because of all the great learnings and being able to apply many of the things that we learn in the program actually to, what I'm doing in my career currently. So being able to do those things simultaneously has probably been the most enjoyable part of the program so far.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for that insight. Feels like you're only just begun, but also right where you're supposed to be. I like that idea. JB, how does it feel to you about a year or so into the program?
Oh man, I at any given moment, it can feel like you've been here 10 months or 10 days or 10 years. Like it is always like a constant, okay, cool. But I talked to you. I know I talked to you before, but was that a year ago? What was it? Yesterday? It just happens. It just happens so quick. And I think I'm at least finally starting to get into a groove. Okay, this is how I'm going to prepare for cases. This is what I'm going to do in class. This is what I'm going to say. And then like coming to the realization that whatever I plan is going to get blown up pretty much within the first 30 seconds of class every single time. Or we kind of mentioned it before, life doesn't slow down. Like there is no OGR waits for nothing. Life waits for nothing. So every single time we, get into something like, oh, well, I was all prepared. It's going to be my best quarter. And oh, my wife is sick. I gotta take off. Like, that kind of thing happens all the time. So it's just unpredictable, but still, I think we're getting there. We're getting there.
Well, let's talk about your story. So, JB, tell us a little bit more about who you are, your background, all those kind of good things, and what you're doing right now, work-wise.
Yeah, sure thing. So, I used to say I had a non-traditional path coming to Darden. But then I learned, I started meeting everybody, and it's like, well, nobody has a traditional path. All these people are completely different. Like there is no, you do what? Huh? Like I mean, I'm telling you, the amount of people that we meet and all the different walks of life people come through, it's crazy to me. But so I coming from a military background, I joined the Air Force right after high school. Did that for about 6 years active duty, 2 years reserve time. I was a life support and survival specialist. So anything on a plane that that'll save your life, parachutes, oxygen masks, G suits, all that fun stuff. That was me. Train you how to use them, teach you how to turn a parachute into a tent and live in the woods for 10 days, all that fun stuff. Did that for, about 8 years. Left the Air Force, went and got finished my degree and moved on. So I was a government civilian for a little bit, working in the logistics and IT space. This was in Oklahoma after I left Oklahoma, the University of Oklahoma Boomer Sooner. After I left, I went back to DC. I'm originally from Virginia, so moved back to Virginia area to be closer to family with my wife and 2 children. And somehow found myself in the tech space. So worked as a DoD contractor for a little while, worked in the IT community, supporting the Army, high level enterprise IT, modernization type work. And then over about 6 months ago now, I actually made a transition into Google. So I'm currently working as a program manager for Google Cloud, primarily supporting their public sector work, state and local government. And I tell people like it is a crazy transition. I went from, teaching people how to jump out of planes, 10 years ago to now working on some of the a $1 trillion company building some of the most advanced AI and data analytics platforms in the world. It makes no sense to me. I still have no idea how I ended up with this crazy path, this transition, but definitely happy to be here, and it's been just such a great experience.
Well, thank you, JB. And I love your point about being a quote unquote non-traditional student in our Executive MBA program. I think it's probably fair to say that non-traditional is the traditional student in this program. And one of the things I think everybody enjoys is, your background, your experience, and then all of a sudden you're in a room full of people who have very different backgrounds, very different experiences. And that's very intentional from the admissions committee. And, when we think about putting the class together, we want as much difference as possible. So that is great. All right, Matthew, coming to you next. Tell us your story.
Yeah, I mean, similar to JB, I mean, I definitely don't have kind of a traditional path either. I think my path kind of started with me, post graduate school. I have a doctoral degree. I'm a pharmacist by training, practiced for a couple of years as a clinical pharmacist in the Lombardi Cancer Center at Georgetown University Hospital. And then I went on to manage a group of pharmacists in the pharmacy service line and Parkview Cancer Institute in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And kind of things were running along really well there. And then kind of in my current role, I was recruited to actually come back to the DC area by Janssen Pharmaceutical Company to help run their medical scientific department. And really that kind of focuses on running clinical trials predominantly in the leukemia, lymphoma, myeloid space of cancer care. And I kind of cover a lot of the large academic centers in what we call the North Atlantic for our company, but basically covers Delaware down to Virginia, and then a little bit of West Virginia as well. And I honestly, I had my eyes on the Darden program for a period of time, and I actually met with Brett probably starting back in 2016, to tell you the truth. So Brett has seen my face probably more than some others. But, and when I decided to come back to the DC market with Janssen, I spent another year here. And then I was like, okay, I got to get back to a place where I'm going to apply. And for me, the big part of wanting to earn my MBA and had to do with kind of the career trajectory I wanted to go on. I looked around and kind of surveyed my field, and most of the people that were in the executive level or the leadership roles, many of them had a doctoral degree. So they were MD, MBA, they were PhD MBA, they were PharmD MBA, or they just had their MBA. And I understood that, okay, so in order for me to get, make this transition from a scientific expert to a business expert, I'm going to need to also have my MBA. And, thankfully, being in the DC market, we have a wealth of riches as far as great MBA programs. And one of the one that kind of stood head and shoulders above all the others, based on kind of the criteria that I wanted, was the UVA Darden program. So I had the opportunity to apply to Darden, and thankfully was accepted, and I had the opportunity to be in this program for now close to 10, a little bit over 10 months, I guess. So it's been a fantastic ride and fantastic experience so far.
Well, I appreciate that, Matthew. And you're right. We were engaged for a number of years as you consider the program. But if our listeners at home are wondering, is that unique? Is that different? It really isn't. Honestly, we talk to people about this program many times for a couple of years, 2-3 years. People kind of drift in and out of the idea of going back to school and pursuing an MBA through an executive format, working while doing this. And typically with where people are in their lives, it's not a small decision. You've got many stakeholders. You've got folks at work. You have very important people at home, oftentimes kids, maybe a spouse, partner, significant other who's also got a busy job, busy career, and not to mention the other things that you do personally that are important to you. And so just trying to figure out how to make all of this work, it can be a little bit of a process. So let's talk a little bit more about where you started to where you are now in the program. We talked around this a little bit earlier about, sometimes you feel right where you are, sometimes you feel like you just started, and maybe sometimes that's the product of constantly having new classes. Like every every quarter, every couple of months, you get a new class. Sometimes it's the second half of a class that you had previously. Sometimes it's a brand new topic you haven't perhaps been exposed to, either here at Darden or elsewhere. Matthew, I wonder, looking back, LR1, quarter one to now, talk about that experience. How do you feel like you've developed during this time?
I think the biggest thing that from the experience I've had is confidence. I think you kind of come into the program, and I know that first LR1, I definitely over prepared, thinking that I needed to be the expert in every area or in every class. And what I would say by now, a couple things I've become much more comfortable with trusting my learning team to deliver on their deliverables. So, our learning team, we split out things based upon who wants to kind of take that particular case. And we prepare and we make sure each other is fully prepared regarding notes and other things that we do to make sure we're prepared. But I think from LR1, I was just over preparing. Spend a lot of time trying to read every single case with all the detail and all the background and all that. Now I've kind of become much more to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to read the case. I may not be able to get to all the supplemental readings, but I'm going to be as prepared as I can be, but I'm not going to over prepare anymore, because I understand, I think a lot of professors kind of have this saying of, if you get 60% there on your own, you can come to class and get the other 40%, because that's part of the learning process and experience that you're going to receive. And I've become much more comfortable there and confident in that. And I've become much more confident in, by the time we get to finals week, I'll be in a place that I can do really well in the final two. So being, comfortable and confident, I think those are the two things I've learned from the process. And going back to what I stated earlier, which, really has to do with how the curriculum is set up. I think the curriculum is really done very well. So you get introduced to a topic, and now, like, I think, Brett, you mentioned that we're in decision analysis. Well, we're in decision analysis 2. We had decision analysis 1. I think that was back in like Q2 or Q1. Okay, I think Brett said Q1. And I mean, we're doing operations 2. Well, we had operations 1 in Q4. So a lot of the topics build on each other. So it's great to be able to kind of revisit a topic. It builds on each other. And you're like, okay, I've done some of this. Now I understand that we're going to layer something else on top of it. But I've already kind of gotten a lot of the background. And being able to have that background and have it build on each other, I think that's kind of the secret sauce that's within the program.
I appreciate that. And many of the students who come here on the podcast and alumni as well talk about confidence as being an area of growth for them during their time in the program. Matthew, why do you think that is for you? And I'm just curious, because I hear it from so many people.
Well, I think, I think for probably every student, you come in with a sense of, okay, even in work, most of the people in this program, one, we're high performers. Many of us are probably type A type personality. So we're used to being first. We're used to being the top person. So you come in with a certain subset of, preconceived notions, I would say, of what you need to present as far as being a student at Darden. And what I've come to learn and appreciated about the Darden experience is, you bring your experience and you help others learn. So I look at our professors as people who guide us through the program, but much of the learning happens with other people talking about their experience, talking about how they apply a particular tool within their work process. And then that's part of the learning environment. So you kind of have to take that mask off of being overconfident. You kind of come in and say, okay, I don't understand this. So this is the person that can assist me in understanding this. And you what I tell people in the Darden program, this is kind of your lowest barrier of what I consider work, meaning you get into this program and no one has the ability to, quote unquote, fire you. No one has the ability to reprimand you. So if you say something wrong or if you say something incorrect, this is a low level environment where you could say something wrong and someone's just going to correct you. You move on. You can voice an opinion and it might be inaccurate and someone might discuss why it's inaccurate, but no one's going to chastise you or anything else about it. But also it's an environment where it's for learning. So if you can't practice it in this environment, so if you can't practice it at Darden, especially when it comes to how you lead a team, how you're going to discuss with a team, how you're going to plan out some recourse for your team to right the ship. This is a practice environment to do it. If you can't do it in this environment, it's going to be really difficult to practice it in real life when the stakes are high at work. So that's how I look at the program. I think that's how you gain confidence, being able to have that practice and repetition throughout the program that gives you the confidence in what you're doing also at work.
I appreciate that point. This is an educational environment. That's one of the things we talk with prospective students about. It does give you a chance to take some risks, to be wrong and have it be, okay, it's just a learning process. We had this conversation with some of our class of 2022 members. And one of them on there talked about this progression of feeling like you have to be right all the time to realizing it's okay to be wrong. And being wrong can actually be something that helps move the conversation forward. Just put it out there. Let the conversation happen and play out, but don't feel like every time you have to have all the answers and know everything perfectly. That's not how things work. JB, same question for you. Wondering a little bit about, where you started back in LR1 about 10 months ago to where you are now. What do you see as the growth and development?
I mean, I will say I am a little bit the inverse of Matthew, where I may not have been quite as prepared coming in to most classes. That was definitely a rough spot for me at the beginning of this. And yeah, it's really just a result of having the schedule. I had 2 young kids at home, a very hectic job at the time. I've switched jobs, moving through all of that and, really trying to figure out, okay, what is my schedule going to be? And how am I going to plan out when I read these cases or when I meet with my learning team? It's really been, one of those big pain points. But at the same time, it's really taught me a lot of that time management side of things and really being able to focus on, okay, I'm going to do this at some point, but I got to coordinate, really focusing on how do I communicate with my learning team on things? How do I communicate with my professors if something is, if I need to, really get something else done? So that's, I would say, biggest growth side of that is typical time management, coordination, and really getting that, focusing on, okay, we've got these 13, 14, 15 cases, and really, like Matthew said, being able to focus time down into, okay, I can get 60% of this knocked out and really have, a good case conversation and really take in from the rest of the class as I go through it. I'd say that's probably the biggest point for me.
I appreciate that point as well, about, you only have so much time and you have to figure out what's your biggest priority. Something we've talked a lot about here on the podcast. It is not easy for very motivated people to accept that they can't do everything. JB, is that something that you had to wrestle with?
You got that right. Yeah, you definitely got that right. And it is one of those pieces where it's almost a humbling experience, right? Where you have to come in, at all of us, everyone coming into this program, top notch, top caliber people, whether it's in their field of work, in their communities, everything. And, it is really one of those experiences where you have to take a step back and kind of do an audit of your life in a sense and go through, okay, every single day, like, where am I kind of slacking off, where I could be adding a little bit of that time in for reading, or adding a little bit more of that time in for family. And I am also in one of those places where I travel a lot for work. And then I might come off a week of travel and hop right into an OGR. like OGR 5.2 I just went through. So that these are kind of those things you kind of have to prioritize. Okay, I've done all of this. Now I need to take some time to go back and talk to my wife and my kids and make sure they're doing okay, and actually, moving something back into the household, because that's another thing that I really have tried to prioritize and not lose throughout this entire experience, is that the people that are supporting us through this, they're just as affected as the rest of us are here. So
that's good advice. You should have those conversations early and before you start the program, and often. Certainly once you start the program. It's been a pretty steady drumbeat here on the podcast for students with families who talk about the fact that they, have a family meeting typically at the start of a quarter. They say, hey, what do we have coming up? This is what my schedule is going to look like, work, school, let's get this all planned out. What are our commitments? Where do I have time? And just continuing to check in, because you're right, JB, the student is pursuing the MBA, but in effect, everyone is part of this process, because everyone is affected by the students' participation in the program. So I appreciate your sharing, both of you sharing all this. Lots of good advice. Things for our listeners to consider. So let's talk about the Black Executive MBA student organization. I was reflecting before we got on this call today. We've had the leadership for every BEMBA board, Black Executive MBA student organization board, here on the podcast since the inception. So this is an annual tradition. Excited to catch up with the two of y'all and hear about what you have in store for this year as you look ahead. But before we get there, some of our listeners may be less familiar with the student organization. So Matthew, can I come to you? Can you tell us just a little bit more about what the Black Executive MBA student organization, or as it's colloquially known, BEMBA, is all about?
Well, I think, when you think about BEMBA, I think BEMBA is a place for diverse students to be able to get together and have an environment, what I would consider kind of a safe space to have topic discussions, which, may not be able to have the space to be able to have during classes, but also the support system to be able to also connect with others who have a similar possible experience as you may have. But once again, it's in a safe space and safe environment where, one, you can get the support that you need, but also you can offer the support to others. And as I kind of transitioned from what I would consider you being a first year, and now we are technically the second years, even though the first years haven't started, they won't start until August of this year. Really, it's also a place to kind of offer that assistance and guidance for the first years to be able to work through the program too, and some of the challenges that might come up through the program, and for them to be able to have a sounding board for. So I really think it's a network and a support system for students of color.
Well, thank you for that and for sharing that. And I will say, it's always, as I've talked with past leadership boards, they've really stressed that it's a community within a community. It's a pretty common refrain that I've heard from folks. JB, lots of different ways to spend your limited free time as an executive MBA student. How did you decide that you wanted to be one of the co-presidents for the Black Executive MBA student organization?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question. And I think, Matthew probably has the same feeling here, but we really had some key ideas for what we wanted to do and how we wanted to see BEMBA grow and reach out to the community through this. And I don't think there's a better way to do that other than taking on a leadership role. And I really want to make sure we can leave a lasting impact with this, whether that's in servitude, recruitment, whatever it is. I really want to make sure that, we have an impact that's going to go down the road in Darden history for 10, 20 plus years, and have something that's going to be have a lasting impact on the school here.
Yeah. Matthew, does that resonate with you? What were your reasons for getting involved as one of the co-presidents of BEMBA?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with JB. I think, for me, it's always been kind of like when you get a call for service, you have the option. you either say yes or you can bow out. And one of the things that I've tried to do, and I learned this early on when I was completing my graduate school training, and that was, focus on doing one, maybe two things really well versus trying to do many things semi well. So I've tried to, even with, adding this to my plate of, okay, this will be my one tunnel vision thing that I will do within the program, is to be a co-president with BEMBA. So I'm peripherally involved with our diversity, equity, inclusion initiative, but that's kind of in conjunction with BEMBA. So that made an appropriate conjunction between the two. But I've really tried to just focus on this one thing and trying to, make sure I'm meeting the needs of the students of color in our program, but also helping with any recruitment and retainment of students of color too. I think that's, if we're being honest, that's an area of opportunity for many universities, is the retainment portion. So making sure that, we don't lose a student of color because of not having a support network or not having a support system available. So I want to make sure that we're bridging that gap for our students of color and making sure that they know that they have, one, the support system to go to, but also a sounding board and someone that can help advocate for them as well.
So I want to give the class of 2023 a lot of credit, already having an impact. I want to talk about something that is ongoing, pretty cool project, specifically related to raising awareness about microaggressions. So past couple weekend residencies, there's a wall that's been displayed, different student stories related to microaggressions, and also on the televisions that are all throughout our space, there's different sort of stories or people talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, what it means to them, and these kinds of things. And I mean, that's powerful. When you walk through the space and you see this, you have the opportunity to educate each other about lived experience. It's been so great to see that. JB, any thoughts on this initiative?
Yeah, absolutely, Brett. I mean, it is one of those conversations, one of those impactful things that's kind of taken an extension of the classroom. We've had a few these cases that we go through are not easy stuff. We're talking through. I'll give one example. We read through a case on Uber this weekend where they're going through this terrible work culture, just some totally egregious stuff, and it's good to have that hour and a half, hour 15 minutes to talk through that in class, but people are really feeling things and want to have a longer conversation about it outside, or have those one-on-one conversations to kind of tell you, hey, this is how I feel. This is maybe what I've gone through in that same situation. And in doing that, I think that's really been impactful on the entire cohort. So I think this microaggression wall, kind of like you said, like really feeling some of people's lived experiences has been a powerful tool in helping that.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add there, and I think that's, the microaggressions idea, and I want to make sure that we give credit to our diversity, equity, and inclusion Vice President, LaShondra Urban, Manuela, Jack, Lauren. I'm probably missing out on a couple of people who kind of helped lead that effort to actually get those microaggressions, one, surveyed from the actual students, but then also printed and put on the different screens and different places for people to see. So to me, it's fantastic work, but I also think it provides an opportunity for, some people who would think that, oh, these are small things. Well, I think the one powerful part about the microaggressions walls is not just the microaggression. There's also why this was, hurtful or impactful for that person who received it. And I think that's what makes the microaggressions wall impactful for students who may have not even thought that they may have said something very similar to a colleague or to someone that they were close with, and may not even understood the context of how that person could have received it. And I think the continued learning of how we as leaders can be able to, one, be allies with our colleagues and the people that we're leading, is an important part of the work we're doing at Darden to be better leaders overall.
You're right that that additional context of this is how it made me feel is
Mhm.
really to me that's where a lot of the power comes in. Well, one, it's the act itself, right? Putting it out there, having the conversation, but two, giving you that sort of internal monologue that the person was experiencing as this was said to
Mhm.
them. That, I mean, talk about building empathy and putting yourself in another person's shoes, all these things that you have a chance to do in the Darden classroom because the way that the learning experience is
Exactly.
structured, right? And I loved the fact that your class made extra time to talk about the case that JB referenced, right? I was in homeroom when the announcements were made, and I think Lauren stood up and said, "Hey, we're going to continue the conversation." I felt like there's probably people had a little bit more to share. We're going to give everybody more time. Want to come for the conversation that's happening. It's great to see students making that space outside of the classroom.
Yeah, and I think one of the bright spots of that, once again, that was a collaboration between our DE&I committee and BEMBA. Understanding that there is an intersection between the two organizations that have overlap. But also, I think one of the big call outs from that was my understanding, because I wasn't at OGR this weekend. Unfortunately, I had family COVID issues that we were working through. Thankfully, everyone's doing well. But it was the room was standing room only. So when you have 100 and I mean I think our cohort is 140 plus people that decide that, hey, this is important to me, and these OGRs, your lunch is important. Sometimes your lunch is, I know for me, lunchtime is important because I like to decompress. I like to eat my food. I like to sometimes take a walk, get some fresh air, all those things. And people say, hey, I'm going to spend my lunch hour diving into this case even more and deeper because I think it's that important. I think it shows the level of leadership, one from our student cohort, but also shows the level of engagement from our cohort as well on these topics surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I also appreciate that. I did not know it was standing room only. I missed that detail. That is awesome to hear. Well, you noted that you want to leave an impact here, and it's a little early in your presidencies to talk too specifically about what you have in mind, but I'm sure there's some high level, maybe goals that you're thinking about as you look forward to the year ahead. What would you highlight along this line, Matthew? Anything that's on your mind?
Well, I think JB and I have already had the opportunity to align on some things we would like to occur. And I think, going back to what we talked about earlier is creating a community. So we're actually going to in the planning stages of actually getting something on the books for our next on grounds residency to bring a group of students together, specifically our students of color, together and just have a discussion surrounding, okay, what things do you want to see? How can we support our incoming students better? How can we maintain cohesiveness as students of colors to make sure that we have sounding boards that one of us, each of us needs? I know we're also planning to host a speakers bureau where we're going to bring in some talent from other organizations to talk about not just sponsorship or allyship, but really, how do I get into this other industry? How do I make this transition? How have you been able to navigate this field that you don't see a lot of African American or Latin talent in, and also expect something from us. Hopefully, I'm actually compiling something for Juneteenth that's coming up this coming Sunday, just as some highlights of these are important things to be thinking about as we think about Juneteenth and why it's important to the African American community. So I think those are a couple of things I know JB and I have talked about that we would like to accomplish over the next year or so.
JB, anything you'd like to add to what Matthew just shared?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I'd say we have three main pillars of kind of what we want to do for the class of 2023. One revolving around community service and really giving back to the folks in the DC area that may not have the opportunity to come to Darden and sit like this. We have to really, I think our first conversation between me and Matthew was really about, hey, I mean, what else can we do to kind of give back to the DC area and make sure that we're involved in the folks that, either look like us or are having struggles outside of the walls of Sands Family Grounds. Like I want to make sure we're really focused on that. And the second would really be on the recruitment and retainment piece that Matthew talked about earlier, making sure that I think, for me coming up, I would never have thought about a Darden MBA as a young person. And I think that's a huge deal. I want to make sure, get the word out and make sure people understand that, hey, this is a possibility for you. You can't get into this. And then three would, just like Matthew talked about a little bit ago, is that community within the community and then really building the bonds of the BEMBA organization and getting the membership together to really talk through some of these harder conversations and some of the experiences that we go through here at Darden.
All right. Well, we'll have to have you back on the podcast to talk about where all this stuff stands, how things are going a little bit further along.
Absolutely.
I have no doubt y'all are going to do great things. So we always end with kind of the same last question. I wonder, a word of advice, something that you would share, encourage them to think about. JB, can I come to you first?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it goes back to something you said earlier on, Brett, which would be have those conversations with your loved ones early about the time impact, about what the reality of the program is going to look like. Have those conversations right now before you get to LR1, before you start the application process. If you're looking for later down the line, really make sure that, hey, this is going to be a huge time commitment, but the rewards that come from it are going to be great. And I'm not talking about after you just graduate. I'm talking as soon as you get on grounds and you start meeting some of these people. I've had some of the most rewarding conversations, experiences just by being with my classmates here at Darden. So I'd say really make sure that you can kind of outline, hey, this is what the time commitment is going to look like, or at least to the best of your ability, because you're not going to know. Let's get that out there right now. It's going to change. But at the same time, like just make sure you can at least get some level of, hey, it's going to take a while, but we'll get there. We'll get through.
Yeah, you're right. It's always hard to explain to folks. Like I can tell you it might be about 15 hours of work per week on average. And I can tell you these are the classes that you should expect to have in a given week. But what I can't tell you is what this is going to look like in your particular life. And what you also can't know until you begin is how you're going to make all this work and what other things are going to happen. There's a we're going to figure this out as we go along, and we're going to figure this out together. Might not be the most comfortable thought, by the way, but that is how it works. So trust in that. So Matthew, a word of advice for our listeners, something you would share?
I think JB hit on, a very important point. I think the only thing I would add is, when you're making the decision, understand that, any decision that you make during this program or going through the program, has an impact somewhere down the line. Either you're deferring not to apply right away or applying right away and jumping right in. Just be fully prepared on that decision and go into it. And when you start the program, coming in with your full self, try to give, and this is really difficult for many of us, try to give your full self when you're on grounds or when you're in LR1, because those are the opportunities where you're going to be interacting with your classmates and you don't know who you're going to be in the room with. I know many classmates already have, similar to JB, have made transitions in their career where that opportunity possibly came from a classmate. I know a few classmates that got opportunities handed to them, not handed to them literally, but they heard about opportunity, with a company because of a classmate who said, hey, we have this posting and I know you want to transition into this area. I can forward your email or your resume over to the hiring manager. that is part of the Darden network. And you think, that's possibly a small thing, but for some people, that's a big thing because that's getting their foot in the door to make a transition from, someone who was working in legislative affairs. Now they're working for Amazon in supply chain management. So that's not always the smoothest transition, but it's able to be done because of that Darden network. So when you're here, doing on grounds or doing LR1, just try to show up as much as you can to those interactions outside of class, because some of these conversations are happening, in study groups, but many times they're possibly happening over a glass of wine or at open road or over dinner at a restaurant, because a lot of people will set up dinners together. That's where those conversations happen. And that's where you're able to build the rapport with your colleagues in order to actually get that opportunity for you. So I would say just make sure when you're here, try to show up as much as you can.
Well, thank you both for your advice. Matthew, on the point that you just raised there, that's something we say all the time to people. And I'll just sort of kind of close with this. We get asked a lot about the lodging that's included in the cost of the program. We have a number of folks who live in the DC metro area, and people are like, do I have to pay for the hotel? I mean, I just live down the street. But what we say to them is like, you should understand how the weekends are designed and just how full the weekends are, from not just the class standpoint, but all the other social stuff. So we began this conversation by talking about the mid-program celebration. I walk to and from work every day. I can't tell you how many people on Friday night I pass coming back from dinner or heading to dinner because they're going out to eat with their learning team or with their classmates. I will say the class of 2023 learning teams, y'all do a great job of getting out to eat in the Washington, D.C. metro area. You should invite your admissions colleagues out occasionally because I'll try to keep up with y'all. I'm doing a good job. And then the other thing that we always share is the relational component of the program. Yes, it happens in class, but it's really cemented outside of class. And there's only 20 weekend residencies. You got 2 leadership residencies. You have 1 or 4 global residencies, or maybe more than 1 if you're an MBA student that wants to travel. But the point is, it goes quickly and you only have so much time. That might sound like a lot of time, but it's really not in the grand scheme of things. So prioritizing the times that you're together, being fully invested. I really appreciate that point, Matthew. And JB, I take it you would agree.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you both. So great having you here on the show to talk a little bit more about what BEMBA has in store in the upcoming year. And congratulations again for being at the program midpoint, so to speak, and best of luck in the year ahead with the Black Executive MBA student organization.
Thanks, Brett.
All right. Thank you, Brett. And don't worry, your dinner invitation is coming. We got you. It's coming your way.
And that was my interview with JB Norcott and Matthew Boyd, newly elected co-presidents for the Black Executive MBA student organization here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's ExecMBA @darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.